Oh hey there, long time no see. So it has been a while since I've done a makeup tutorial, and I'm in the middle of my run of performing in Little Orphan Trashley, the adult pantomime starring Rhonda Birchmore, Gary Sweet and Trevor Ashley. So I thought I would do my makeup for my character, which is Bullshit, the dog. Kind of like a half man, half dog styled character. Yeah, I'm just gonna basically show you how I do my look for Bullshit. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so I've moisturized my skin and removed any excess hair that I don't want. I'm a hairy dog, so I'm allowed to have a little bit of fur. Most of it will be covered up by the costume anyway. So I'm just gonna start with a little bit of my TV stick and bung that on. So basically I'm laying down all the colour of foundation that I want first. And just using a variance of shades just so I can get the right tones and colours that I want in my makeup. Now it's really cold here in Melbourne at the moment, and all of my cream based makeups are quite hard and solid. So what I'm doing is putting my foundation on my skin first and letting it cook. So some of you might be familiar with the term cooking if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race or you know any drag queens. And basically cooking means to heat up, basically. It's what you do with food. Things like emollient based makeups, creams, things of that nature usually will change their consistency depending on what temperature they are. So when something is a little bit warmer, it tends to glide on, it tends to move around a little bit easier. So that's what I'm doing now, is popping on the colour and letting it heat up on my skin a little bit before I blend it all together. So once it's a little bit warmer, it will blend a lot easier, both into the skin and with the other colours that I'm using. And also, it's Gary Sweet singing in the background. Yes, he can sing. So the lighter shades are going on where you would typically highlight. There's like a million different highlighting and contouring videos on YouTube. So if you want to know the ins and outs of that, then Google it. What I'm using my highlighting colours and my lighter shades for is mostly for contrast against darker shades that I'm going to be using on my eyes, and that will become a bit clearer as we get further ahead in the makeup. Start to buff and blend my colours in. This is just a little dome-headed brush. It's quite dense. It's really good for buffing in cream or oil-based foundations. Just fast little circular motions, keeping the tip of the brush flush with the surface of my skin. Now it's quite a thick foundation that I'm using. It's like a combination of matte full coverage and Kryolan TV paint stick. So even though it's a really thick foundation and full coverage, I want to really buff it, work it into the skin so it's not sitting on top, like not sitting on the surface, but becomes a part of the skin. And this will really help if you are a sweater like me, because this is a stage makeup and I'm dancing a lot in the show. I do sweat a lot, which is why I'm using more of the emollient or oil-based or cream foundation, and then I'll set it all with powder a bit later. Another brush, this one's from Illamasqua. It's a similar kind of shape, but I just use it with the lighter colours just so there's not too much cross-contamination, if you like, between the lighter and darker shades of foundation that I'm using. Okay, starting to look more blended. This is a little Ben Nye colour wheel. Just using the lightest shade in the middle. I'm just going to pop that just above the apple of my cheek, just on that highest part of my cheekbone, and blend that in with a stiffer brush, a synthetic brush, just to add a little bit more density of colour right above the eyebrow. Again, this is going to add a lot of contrast to the darker colours that I'm using a little bit later on. Now while I've got my lighter colours, I'm just going to blend a few together, and this is going right above the lip. This is like the muzzle area of a pooch, and I'm just kind of aiming to follow the natural shapes of the folds are in my skin, just so the makeup works with the natural structure of my face. I'm not going for 100% doggy realness because the character isn't a legitimate dog, although I act like one, but we want that kind of hybrid vibe going on. And I'm just using the stiffness, the firmness of that brush to just get rid right underneath the hairs of my mole. Theatre life. Okay, now to contour, I didn't want to go out and spend another, like $50 or so, however many these TV sticks are. So I found a lipstick that is a nice dark, rich brown colour. It's a matte texture, so it's quite highly pigmented and not too glossy or shiny. So I'm just going to use that, and I'm going to smear a little bit under the cheekbones, a little bit into the temple, forehead, and I'm using this brush here. It's another MAC brush. What is it? The 227. It's like a giant eyeshadow brush. It allows me to blend out the colour, but not blend it out too much, so I'm able to keep the shape happening. I'm just rounding that down towards the corner of my mouth, and I'm going to follow this shape up here and do the same on the other side. That lipstick I found was from Inoxa. You know, it was like $10 or something, which is not the cheapest product, but it's a lot cheaper than buying a dark tone foundation if you're only going to be using it for this purpose. And I'm just going to use whatever's left on my brush to just sharpen up the edge of my nose a little bit, just to keep that contour happening. Now this is an asymmetrical makeup. One eye is going to be different from the other, intentionally. Alright. Now I've used this before, I've used it in my mannequin tutorial. It's different packaging now. This is the 1000-hour hair touch-up stick. It's for like touching up the roots of your hair if you've got regrowth. I'm going to try it in my hairline, and it's a little bit harder than the last one was. The last one was kind of like a wind-up lipstick looking thing. This one's like a real sharp chisel. Because I'm a black dog, I've got black fur, black costume, I want to make my hairline match that. This is quite solid. It's quite... I think we can make it work. So I'm just doing the front of my hair because that's all you'll see in the costume. And I am bringing that down onto the forehead. And that's just darkening up my hairline a little bit. It's not really coming onto the skin as well as I would have liked. So I would probably recommend using black paint stick, grease stick instead of that. I'm just going to try and blend that a little bit. There is a bit of black eyeshadow on this brush. The past few nights I've just been using black eyeshadow for this hairline. It's not too bad. I'm going to pop a little bit of that dark black eyeshadow, Obsidian by Illamasqua. And just continue around under the cheekbone, ever so slightly. Because we're putting eyeshadow straight onto a wet cream, it will grip really well. So you just want to have a feather touch. Also going to just run that across my ears, just so everything kind of blends in. I wear fake ears, so you don't really want to see my ears too well. Got a brown lip pencil here. This one is Chestnut from MAC. And I'm going to just frame my muzzle. Blend this into the lighter shade, just soften it up around the nostrils. And I'm just using a little bullet brush from Napoleon Paris. Edge of the muzzle is harder, but the inside blends down into that lighter colour. Alright, while we are still using creamy products, notice that we haven't powdered down any of this yet. I'm just gonna continue from this line underneath. So the lips now join into the muzzle. Dogs have really wide mouths that kind of run along the side of their faces. This is to kind of give the impression of something similar. So I tend to change the direction or the angle of the pencil. Notice like I kind of drag it in some ways. That kind of allows me to keep the line relatively straight. And if I want to tidy it up, I'll just use the tip to get a nice fine edge. Fill in from the sides, but leave the inside of your lip clean. Going back in with the same bullet brush, I'm just going to soften the insides of that lip. Voila. Now, one final thing before I powder. Gel liner. This one's a Maybelline one called Brown, and it's the darkest matte brown in a gel liquid liner that I could find on the day without costing a fortune. Going back in with the bullet brush, just gonna frame out the underside of my eye. Now, this isn't necessarily like a cream or an emollient kind of product, although it is, but it's designed to dry, so you're probably saying, why are you doing this now? Well, for longevity of the makeup for one, and because I don't necessarily want the intensity of this colour to be as pronounced as it is when it's first applied. So that's just lining the eyes top and bottom, and then I'm going in with a nice small fluffy blending brush. I think this one's from Crown Brush, and just using it clean to start, just to soften up that underside. Blending it down quite far because you really want to smoke this out. And then picking up some product from the pot, starting in the outer corner and working it in, following the natural shape of my eye socket. And then we blend, kind of like backfilling from this outer corner in towards the center of the eye, so less product ends up towards the inside of the eye and the strength remains on the outside. And as we do that, I'm moving up as well. So we get a nice fade in towards the eyebrow, and now that the lower and upper lines connect, we can start to blend those out. It does actually blend a lot easier when foundation is still wet. So we've just contoured that eye and faded it out. Now it's time to powder. Just double check your skin, make sure that nothing's creased up too much, blending out any creases that have occurred through expression. Love work. Now I'm using a nice big fluffy powder brush. This one's from Elamasca, and I'm just using a leftover amount of invisible powder from MAC, but any translucent powder will work. Finer the better if you want a nice soft finish, and I am packing it on thick. I'm going to stretch out my skin and then push on. You might want to breathe out while you do your mouth and your nose. Powder puff works great for this, but I find that a brush used in a similar way works just as well. I'm going to powder over the contoured eye, but not over this eye because I haven't finished making it up yet. I'm not putting too much powder above my eyebrows just because when I continue the makeup, I want to allow a little bit of the slickness or the creaminess of the makeup to help me apply the next product. I'll explain why later. Now I should mention the reason why I powdered everything is to obviously take away the wet finish of the foundation. It seals everything into the skin, so if you have a little scratch or wipe your makeup, it's not going to come off onto your finger. It's nice and dry. Okay, so now I'm going to sharpen my black feline kohl pencil from MAC, which I reckon is one of the best black pencils on the market, and I'm just going to fill up the inner ring of my eyes. Now, a lot of people find this really tricky to do, and it'll just be a big old blinking mess. Now, if you have a problem with this, because you want to line the bottom waterline of your eye, but also the top, you want to fill it up. So if you're comfortable, you can kind of do it by feel. Just look away from the direction that you're drawing. Otherwise, you can pop it inside your eye, close your eye, and while your eye remains closed, kind of wiggle it back and forth following the width of your eyeball. You want to make sure it gets right up in through those lash roots. I'm going to pop a little bit on top on the skin part, right into the lashes, and then just use an angle brush just to soften that black. Just Gonna wing it out ever so slightly, but all we're doing here is just blending black pencil. Gives you a bit of a cat eye, a bit of a feline looking eye. That's all you need for that. Same goes for the other side. You can be a little bit more messy over here because this eye will be completely blackened. I'm making a big old mess. That's okay. Now I'm using a synthetic eyeshadow brush, like the fluffy kind, but not too fluffy. And I'm going to use my black Chromaline from MAC, which is another gel cream liner. And I'm just going to fill up this eye. Really just like slapping it on. I love the gel cream products because they are water resistant and they're super versatile. You can just use them for just about anything and anywhere on the face. Some people even like to line the inner rims of their eyes instead of using a pencil. Some people swear by it. I don't tend to do that myself. Even though the product's designed to dry, some people say that it lasts a lot longer than just using a pencil. Why don't you let me know how you go? Write in the comments what you prefer to, what do you think's the best. Now as we go towards the inside, I just kind of use the tip of my brush instead of using it flat on, just to blend it so the edge is a little softer. I'm taking this all the way up to the eyebrows, you can see, or garage doors as Raja would put it. Again, as we get towards the outside, you can just start to fade it out a little bit. It doesn't have to be neat, same as underneath. Get nice and thick under the eye, but instead of keeping it elongated and pulled out, we kind of want to round it out. So it's like a puppy dog eye patch, you know, like the band member from The Pretty Reckless. Yeah, it's pretty similar. Now I am softening that edge ever so slightly. Because this area of my skin has been more powdered, it is a touch harder to blend out the gel creams onto powdered skin, but it doesn't have to look perfect. After you've finished with your brushes and gel cream liner products, always give them a wipe off on tissue or a piece of paper towel, just because that crap will dry in your brushes and it's a lot harder to clean once it's dry. I'm going back in with my black eyeshadow, a cheap little angle brush that I got at the dollar store, and I'm just going to seal in any gaps, any spots that have kind of creased up, just so we get a super black, white, absorbing black hole for an eye. Pinch the brush to go underneath just so it narrows. It also helps to blend the edges a bit. Okay, here's the fun part, the fun time-consuming part. I've got an angle brush. This one's another crown brush, a synthetic angle brush. That's my favorite at the moment. Back in with the gel liner. When I get it on my brush, I'm just running it along the edge of the jar, just so it stays in a nice fine point. You can see it's nice and really thin. I'm going to start to run that through my brows, but I'm using a bit more of a flicking motion. This is just to lay down the shape that I want for my bushy eyebrow. So having that white or the lighter colour just above the eyebrow is going to help pronounce these spikes or these little hairs, just so that they're a little bit more defined. Now again, with a nice sharp brush, I'm going to go underneath and just get some little tips happening. Now you're going to want to go back into your product a fair bit. You want to keep it wet, because once it starts drying out, it's not going to be too helpful. So I'm just using a very light amount of pressure while I'm doing the finer hairs underneath, but the more pressure you apply, the thicker the line will become. So we don't want all of the hairs to be too thick, we want a variance, pushing the brush down at the angle that I want and then flicking it away. And change the direction towards the inside a little bit. So nice big unruly Brooke Shields brows. Same for the other side, but we're going to continue the flicks to go almost all the way around the eye. Now again, I didn't powder too much around this area above my eyebrow, just because I want the product to glide across the skin. It's a lot harder for the product to go on evenly when the surface is powder dry. So if there's a little bit of creaminess, a little bit of moisture underneath there, it's going to help the liner go on a bit smoother. Sometimes, depending on the colour, it'll alter the colour ever so slightly. Like it can make blacks look a little bit blue. And something that I learned from Tabitha's salon takeover is like removes like, and the same applies to gel cream liners. If you've ever tried to do like, a mass colouring and you've gone back in with like another application after this one's dried, it will actually take it off. So it's best to get all of your colour on in one foul swipe, rather than trying to apply more after the first coat has dried, if you know what I mean. So thanks, Tabitha. They're not all going to be perfect, example, but in the general scheme of things, it should look quite fuzzy and fairy from the audience's perspective anyway. I'm not taking it all the way to the inside of the eye just because the angles of the skin under that area and the tension of the skin is a lot less. So sometimes your product can kind of skip over parts of the skin depending if you've got quite papery skin like I do. It's really fine, thin skin and it moves a lot, which is why I kind of stretch out while I'm applying it. And they're kind of different every time I do them, so sometimes I love them, sometimes they're just like, depends how much patience you have. Okay, I think that'll do for now. No, it won't. Can't help myself sometimes. Alright, that will do. That'll do, people. Now just to finish off the eyes, a nice good coat of waterproof mascara. Even though you can't really tell a big difference on the black eye, I am a perfectionist and I must have my lashes painted. You don't want any dusty looking powdered lashes floating around in a big black eye anyway, but for the more natural contoured eye, it is essential. And brush the lashes in the direction that you want them to go. I like to fan mine out so they kind of splay all the way around. Okay. Alright, the finishing touches. Chroma line, and this time I'm going to use my lip brush from Alaska. I'm buttering up both sides. I'm just going to create a little, like a half circle shape right across the tip of my nose. And fill that down. And try and fill everything before it dries out too much. And then from the inside of the nostril, I'm just going to round that out. Join it back up towards the side of the tip, and then I actually take that just on the inside of my nostril as well. Check your work, look at yourself from different angles, make sure that it's symmetrical, and then I'm just going to flatten the brush as much as I can with the product. Just using the very tip of the brush, I'm just going to drag a line down the center. As dogs have that kind of part or that seam between the muzzle, and join it up to the nose. Clean off the brush. Now, because that's going to dry and look pretty matte when it's dry, and dogs are known to have wet noses, I'm going to mimic that wet nose effect by using a metallic black pigment. I can't tell you what it's called, what its name is, although all I can tell you is that it came in a stack like this, and it's really the most metallic black pigment that I've ever really been able to find. Everything else that I've seen has been like a gunmetal grey or a glittery black. So this is the darkest, like true metallic pigment that I've been able to find, and it works a treat for what I'm doing with it. And I'm just going back in with my black eyeshadow brush, and I'm just going to work out a pigment that I just spilt everywhere. I'm just going to push that right on top of my schnoz, and even though it's going on to a dry surface, it grips pretty well because this pigment does contain emollients, or it does have a certain amount of wetness to it. It doesn't look wet, it's not wet to the touch, but usually any pigments that kind of group together or balls up and kind of sticks to itself, you know that it contains emollients, as opposed to the more matte eyeshadows or pigments, so it just naturally wants to bond. So it doesn't take away too much of the blackness of the nose, but it will bounce the light off of it. So it just gives it that kind of polished, wet look. For effect, I'm just going to use a little bit of an El Cheapo Essence brand waterproof liquid eyeliner, and just use the tip. paint on a couple little dots, and that's to mimic the effect of whiskers growing out of a follicle. I'm going to pop on a little bit of my, where is it? Oh, this old tinted lip conditioner that I've had kicking around for ages. It's just a warm brown tinted lip conditioner. Just going in the center of my lip, just so my lips can stay a bit more comfortable. I can also take down a bit of the natural pink colour that occurs in my lip. And there you go. That's Bullshit the Dog. So that's without the headgear and with the headgear. So you can see that most of the hairline is actually quite hidden. Same with the ears, and that's why I don't really go underneath with too much makeup on the neck. But yeah, so that is my tutorial for Bullshit the Dog theatrical stage makeup. I hope you have picked up some tips or techniques that you can utilize for your own makeup, or have maybe gotten some inspiration to try something new. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.